Okay, thank you. Welcome to the meeting of the Peaslee Building Committee. It is Tuesday, May 27th, 7 p.m. I'm Erica Hall, Chair, and I'll call this meeting to order. It's actually 7:05 p.m. So welcome and thanks everyone who's here tonight. You want to do a quick round of introductions for our committee members? We could start with Lauren.
Sure. Lauren Bailey-Jones, Northborough School Committee.
Kevin Viersch, resident and parent.
Rob Tomasetti, Peaslee Building Committee.
Erica Hall.
Diana Nicholas.
Tristan Besant.
John Durkin.
And then we also have a superintendent rep here. Yep.
Greg Martin as superintendent.
And Becky Pellegrino, Assistant Superintendent of Finance.
Thank you. So thanks for joining. Just a couple housekeeping notes before we hop into our agenda. Following town elections, we have been assigned, Mike Tejan is joining as our select board liaison. I believe he's joining us momentarily. So thank you for hopping on, and we'll give him a chance to do some introductions when he comes. And then for the minutes, I'd like to thank Mitch Cohen for helping us and serving up until this day to get the committee up and running. And just by way of some background, and of course, Mike isn't here yet, so maybe we'll get background twice, but for those of you in the room, we know Peaslee was identified and invited into feasibility by the Massachusetts School Building Authority, MSBA. And because it's a building built in 1962, and despite being extremely well maintained, it is due for some future planning. And so as part of the enrollment, there are two different scenarios for grade configuration and enrollment numbers. One would be a K through 5 plus pre-K at 310 students. And the other scenario would be a grade 3 through 5 at 625 students. We are, as part of this process, have created a procedure that is approved by the MSBA. And on section 5 of the packet that you have here is the procedure that we are following and have publicized for selecting our owner's project manager. Number one is that a subcommittee of the Peaslee School Building Committee is determining whether all of the respondents met the minimum requirements. And we did end up with 10 respondents, which have all been logged and sent to us. And then two is that we're ranking the responses based on weighted evaluation criteria. So those are in front of you, just as a reminder. You're very familiar with them, having slogged through them all weekend, and thanks to everyone who did that. And then once they're shortlisted, references will be called and there will be an interview. So as a reminder, the interview is taking place next Monday, June 2nd, here in this same room. Another reminder, our interview process says that our total interview time allowed is 45 minutes. So depending on what time you turn into a pumpkin, we may or may not want to be here till midnight. We have a minimum of 3 that we have to shortlist, but we have some time constraints in the amount of time that we have starting at 6 p.m. on Monday. I would like to say thank you to Becky, who's here tonight, because the MSBA received this very fat package and approved it without any corrections or changes, and that is because of your detailed handling of it. So thank you very much for being so detailed. So we have received 10 respondents for OPM, incredibly well qualified, and the body of work that is encompassed by all 10 of these throughout the state is just very impressive. We can't hire all 10, so we hire 1. So our job tonight is to shortlist. And just a reminder that, you know, Northborough has entrusted us with the job of selecting a firm that can meet us at this place and this time with our specific constraints and requirements. So who's a best fit for us at this point in time? Lastly, we have a lot of really good in-depth industry knowledge from this group of people who sit here. We are lucky as a town So I am interested in your feedback. I hope you will provide it and speak candidly so that we can make the decision we've been entrusted to make. With that being said, we have some agenda items. I don't know if you're looking at it. Yeah, say that again?
Oh, I was just wondering if,
Yes.
for the record, for anyone
Yes.
who's just tuning in, and also for myself, could we do introductions with the expertise in the room that you just mentioned? So that
Yes.
as our conversation goes on, we can turn to those people, and anyone listening can, know of our expertise.
I think that's a great idea. You want to do that now as part of our intro? Let's do
Yeah.
it. Yeah, we'll start with Lauren. Yeah.
So I have the least expertise. I'm here with the Northborough School Committee, so I'm really looking for a lot of the expertise in the room.
And what do you do for work, Lauren?
Oh, sure. I'm a teacher. I'm an educator in the
Okay.
middle school, so I bring that expertise. So this part of the project phase, I'm looking for a lot of the skilled expertise in the room.
Thank you. Kevin?
Sure, my name's Kevin Viersch. I am an architect in Massachusetts. I'm also licensed in a few other New England states. I've been an architect for 23, 24 years doing this, and then my strongest asset, I guess, to the team is I'm a parent. I have 4 kids who've gone through, or either at Peaslee right now, or have gone through Peaslee, so I kind of have that perspective of things to add, and I'm also a long-term resident in Northborough and hope to be here for a long time, and very interested in the future of our town.
Thank you. Rob?
Rob Tomasetti. Again, I've been in Northborough for about 10 years now, a parent of 3 who have all benefited from the Lincoln Street School project. That was, I believe, our most recent capital project for the school system, so very acutely aware of what a good financial steward what a project like that really can bring to the table. Professional expertise, I have just about 20 years in the construction and building trades, so as a project manager, so that's what I hope to bring to the table.
And Erica Hall, I'm also a Peaslee parent, so I have a 3rd grader, and I also have a 4-year-old who may be experiencing the beneficiary of some of what we talk about tonight.
I'm Diana Nicholas. I have 2 children who both went to Peaslee and are finishing the high school soon. I'm an architect. I've been practicing over 25 years. I own an architecture firm in Boston. We predominantly focus on work in Massachusetts. I've done a lot of public work. Specifically, I've done 2 MSBA schools in what they call the core program. So this is a project in the core program where you go through all of the MSBA modules. I'm also an MCPPO architect, and that's a specific MSBA certificate you get where you have gone through the state program, which Rebecca, I know, has gone through as well. So I bring that background, and I'm very excited to be working on this project with town.
I'm Tristan Besant. I've been a resident in Northborough for 12 years, have 3 children currently in Northborough schools, Lincoln, Melican, and Algonquin. They've all benefited from the Lincoln Street project that began when my oldest was in kindergarten, and feel like that was a very good investment for the town. Professionally, my current profession, I'm a financial advisor working with people, but I spent nearly 20 years in construction management, namely school building. Built several schools, some for the town of Westboro, down the Brookline, but I bring that experience in working with architects, OPMs, towns, various boards, and finding cost-effective solutions, problem-solving, and really taking a project from start to finish. And I hope to help the town develop a successful project here that will really be a good investment for the town for many years to come.
John Durkin, I'm a longtime resident of Northborough. I actually came here, my father was hired as the first principal at Woodward School in Southborough. And I went through Algonquin, and both my kids went through Peaslee and all the Northborough schools. So I have my background for that is like I realize the value of education. My occupation, I've been a lifelong construction guy with experience in concrete, site work, sewer, water, drain. Not so much this paperwork end of it, but we had plenty of people to handle that, so thank you.
Thank you. And Sean, you're liaising with Is it Parks and Rec?
Yeah, I'm on the Parks and Rec Commission.
Parks and Rec. Yep, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Good idea, Lauren. Thank you. So having introduced our topic at hand and everybody's chomping at the bit, we have some agenda item, which is just to approve meeting minutes from Tuesday, April 8th meeting. We don't have a screen here to put them up on, but I would entertain a motion to approve minutes from our last meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Is there any discussion? And hearing none, all those in favor, and we will do a roll call vote, right? Yes.
And no one's remote, so you can do a,
No one's remote, so we can do, okay, that'll save some time. So all those in favor signify by raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed, abstaining? Thank you. Motion carries to approve minutes from our last meeting. All right, at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca to go through the logistics of our scoring. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you all for the work that you did over the weekend. I know it was a lot to read through, and so we really appreciate everyone taking a look at the proposals. As Erica said, we did receive 10 proposals. Actually, in reality, we received 11. Unfortunately, one of those proposals was received at 11:05, so 5 minutes after the deadline, and we were not able to consider that applicant. What we have done is we put together a spreadsheet for each of you to compile your scores based on the criteria that was outlined in the request for services document. So obviously, all of the firms did receive that document, and they knew what we were looking for as we were going through this process and going through the review of the firms. Would you like for me to share preliminary? I don't know, Sean, I didn't receive your scoring sheet, so I didn't know if you had any scores for the applicants.
I didn't have my laptop, I couldn't do the
Okay.
spreadsheet.
Okay, all right. We just want to make sure that you have the
I
opportunity.
have some extensive notes.
Yes, yep. What I can do right now is I could share kind of some of the overall results, I think, based on the work that we did this summer, this weekend, just so that we have an idea of where we stand. So I will just go alphabetically. And what I did was I took everyone's rankings, put them into a spreadsheet, and we have an average ranking based on what everyone had submitted. So the first firm is Accenture, Infrastructure and Capital Projects, and their average ranking is 84.67. Atlantic Construction and Management is 69.67. CHA is 88.33.
do you want to slow down? Just
Oh, sure. Colliers is 92.78. Left Field is 87.67. Lero is 81.22. PMA Consultants is 90.33. Turva Corporation is 78.22. Turner Townsend Heary is 86.67. And the Vertex Companies is 89.33.
Who was between left field and PMA?
Lero. And they were 81.22. CHA was 88.33.
Could you reconfirm Colliers and left field, please?
Sure. Do you want me to do all of them again? Would that be
Run
helpful?
through them,
No?
yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Sorry, I didn't realize going so fast. So Accenture is 84.67. Atlantic 69.67. CHA, 88.33. Colliers, 92.78. Left field, 87.67. Lero, 81.22. PMA, 90.33. Turva, 78.22. Turner and Townsend Heary, 86.67. And Vertex Companies, 89.33. So if I sort right now, according to the highest ranked right now, it would be Colliers, PMA, and Vertex.
And just as a reminder, before we hop into our discussions for tonight, this decision needs to be thoroughly documented. We'll provide kind of a narrative of our conversation and how we arrived at our top three. So the numbers are not set in stone, and this is, now the purpose is discussion and just some kind of brainstorming. We could certainly start with the sort of top group for selection, and unless you have a recommendation, if others had additions to that top group, or, yes, Sean?
I was just wondering, could I enter a couple of just general questions?
Yeah.
Concerning an OPM, how do we pay them, or do they get a percentage of the bill? There was nothing in here about how they charge for their services.
Yeah, initial response is the town has allocated a certain budget, and the contract negotiation takes place following a final selection after interview, and that negotiation happens with the assistance of Rebecca and between the town and the OPM. Anything to add?
No, so at last year's town meeting, 900,000 was allocated for the feasibility and the schematic design, which is the beginning. Well, we're in the feasibility stage, and next we will be in the schematic and design phase. So those funds will be used for both the OPM as well as the architect. And so we will need to negotiate, we would need to negotiate what those rates would be. However, the firms are aware of what our feasibility amount that was approved.
Just another question, if you don't mind.
Yep.
A lot of these OPMs have architects on their staff. If we hire them, does that mean we don't do a separate architectural? Or is an architect always something
That
different?
question I'm going to have someone else answer, and I bet someone in this room can answer that very thoroughly. Yeah.
There's always an architect.
Yeah.
So the purpose of the OPM is they act in our behalf. So we are essentially the owners, being the town, but we don't have the time, the expertise, the facilities to be there, the day-to-day management. So we hire the firm who will be an expert for us. They're there to kind of be the quarterback between the interests of the town, to help manage the architect and eventually manage the builder. And really simplify the information that comes to us in a way that is packaged, digestible, really be kind of a gatekeeper. So they're kind of an independent body that is charged with managing the project and being a consultant for us. The architect will then be hired and reports back to them as well as us. And the architect staff is much bigger. Generally, OPMs are a small staff assigned to the project, and architects are going to have quite a large staff, any number of consultants for mechanicals, plumbing, things like that. So it's,
Do you think it's an advantage for an OPM to have architects in their firm?
it is. I think it is, because then you have people who understand why design choices might be made, and understand the process. Same reason we have architects and construction folks on this committee, because it helps us to get a balanced perspective for, what we're looking at.
Yeah.
And looking through the resumes of a lot of the OPMs that were proposed on, not just architects, you have people who are engineers, you have people who are commissioning agents with help with the automation and like the building management systems. So it's really a very diverse group of employees.
The only thing I would add is that as part of the MSBA process, MSBA drives the designer selection. So we will have a seat on their selection committee for the designer. That is led by MSBA, so we will be part of that process. The hiring of the OPM really is the only kind of hiring that this committee will do independent of kind of MSBA Board of Directors.
So that leads me to two more questions, but one, they all talk of a commissioning agent, and I'm not 100% sure I understand what that is. Is that in their firm, or is there a separate entity that?
That will typically be a separate entity of the builder and the architect, the design team, the owner. The commissioning agent is really, and Tristan, step in here where I'm misspeaking. The commissioning agent is going to be responsible for essentially auditing the quality and the functionality of the mechanical portion of.
During the whole
Usually
process?
During
following
construction
the startup of the.
and at startup. So when we start up all the mechanical systems.
So installation checklists, making sure that what is on the design documents, on the engineering documents is exactly followed, and then shepherding that through the startup and making sure it functions exactly as it's supposed to.
They also work now, particularly with MSBA, on building envelope, so looking at the tightness of the waterproofing details, the insulation, all those types of things that help with energy efficiency of the building. So think of them kind of like the energy and quality auditor, to make sure that the architect and engineers have designed details that are good and work, and then making sure that the contractor has implemented them correctly, and then testing them to make sure that they actually do work in the real world and it wasn't just nice on paper. And they're typically, they are hired and paid for by the MSBA for school projects. So that's not something that we have to hire. But the OPM does need to be well-versed in their role and making sure that they're doing their job and communicating effectively with the design team and with the builder.
And that leads me to one more question, if I could, Erica.
Yes.
So a lot of these applicants touted leads and net zero. Is that a directive from us, or is that an alternative, or do we want to make sure that it's,
That's an MSBA mandate.
do they want, it's so,
That has to either be LEED or CHIPS, which is the California High Performing School.
that's a requirement.
Just as a reminder, all into the mic, or,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, we have little instructions here, and I don't know how, but and Sean, yeah, okay, yeah. And Sean steering the place apart, okay. Yeah, but I just want to make sure it picks up
Yes.
this detail. Thank you.
That is
Yep.
a requirement by the MSBA.
Yeah, what level?
Some of the firms
Yeah.
didn't really
Some
mention
people
that.
kind of just blew through that one, yeah. But I will say, I'm pretty confident any of these firms can handle LEED or CHIPS. It's pretty
Right.
basic at this point.
All schools are at least LEED silver at this point.
Yeah.
There's gold and platinum above that. Those are decisions that we would make here as a body if we wanted to go above and beyond.
Yep.
As would pursuing a net zero, if that was something else we wanted to do. That's not mandated, I don't believe, at this point.
Are
That's
we a stretch code town?
a question.
I don't think we.
I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't know.
the answer to that either.
All right,
I can
thank
find
you,
that out. I'll
Sean.
find
I mean, good questions and good discussion. All right, so we have a top 3 firms based on initial numbers, and is there any, should we add any to the initial bundle for consideration that are high-ranking among your, any that you ranked as top that didn't make it onto the list? Yes, I see a hand.
Sorry, I have one more question.
Yes.
This piece of paper has different ratings on it than the ones we used and that are in the book and the ones we used on our homework.
So that paper,
this for a
those are
different time?
draft questions, so, so that we can put together the questions for the interviews for next Monday.
Okay, got it.
that's what-
Just making sure I know what
yes,
this
yep.
is. Okay, thank you.
Oh, so these are not questions related to,
Correct.
no, this is for later.
Yep.
Sorry, that was
Thank
my
you.
oversight. I didn't
Nope,
look
okay.
at it carefully, so, yes. Yes.
Related to your question about these, as we get into discussing the short list as it currently stands and just the firms in general, one of the questions that I will be asking and I would like us to consider as a potential standard question is more information on people's staffing. Because this is something that I looked at kind of relentlessly. It's hard to tell from firm to firm. Some of them are offering us a day a week from people, and some of them are offering us, 20 plus hours a week from people. So given that some of these firms have incredible quals and people that are really talented, I think it would behoove us to understand how much of that talent we would be getting from these firms that are high on our lists. So I'm just going to throw that in there for now. When we come back to the questions, maybe we can revisit that. But since you raised the questions,
Thank you.
And how does the hours that they give us relate to the fee that they're going to ask for later on?
the fee is not something that we actually can begin to evaluate, but that's a good point. I
Just
mean,
for the record, what mandates our stepping back from fee and the ability to negotiate on that?
well, it's not something that is going to change our evaluation and MSBA's sort of evaluation of how we choose to select a firm. Like as Erica pointed out, and Rebecca knows that we will be drafting, we have to write a narrative of why we're choosing them. And so there's sort of a healthy, I think you can speak to this quite well, there's a healthy balance with the amount of staffing that we're going to get. We don't want a half a day from a project manager. We don't want 40 hours from a project manager, but it also depends if they're going to give us a senior project manager, an assistant project manager, maybe a day a week is okay. I don't know how many years of experience do those folks have. Like there are all these layers and levels, and that's something maybe we're going to look at some tonight. Maybe it's something we look at when we interview them just to better understand what we're getting. But to me, this is like a huge aspect of OPM selection because these firms are all qualified. They all know MSBA well. They've all delivered beautiful projects on time, on budget. They know MSBA. I mean, I'm excited about the group we have, but I just want to make sure that the town is going to get like a solid team of people that's going to be here for us. So that's why I'll step off of my soapbox for now, but.
Certainly not a soapbox.
Okay, I want to make sure that.
It is kind of the heart of what we're
And-
doing tonight. This
Yeah.
is much less, looking at bids and hiring the lowest bidder. This is a job interview, and, excuse me, and these firms are interviewing, to be on our staff. So that's the way we should be approaching this, is we're hiring a member of our staff who is going to be overseeing the success of this project. The actual cost is part two, that's negotiated after, and that will be based on their staffing levels, the duration of the project, and for OPMs, it's a pretty straightforward calculation. If they look at, here's the number of months and years that the project is, here's our number of staff, here's their hourly rate. And their hourly rates will all be quite similar because they compete in this space frequently, and that information gets out there. So the key is picking a firm and, more importantly, the individual team members, to Diana's point, that we believe will do a good job for us and represent our interests well and make sure that the project flows smoothly.
And during the interviews, we should get a sense of the individuals who'll be working on the Peaslee Building Committee's behalf. So it should not be vague during the interviews of who. And therefore, I think your point around the questions that we ask are really important. And truly, the OPM and the team make or break the project.
Yes.
Question, perhaps out of ignorance, is it inappropriate per MSBA to request rates in accompanying the interview material?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
We would have to select the firm, and then that's when we would start to negotiate. After we've made our selection for our top choice and who we wish to negotiate with, that's when we would start that process.
And
It's similar to, in procurement, it's similar to like an RFP, a request for proposals, where you're really looking at, first you're making a selection based on someone's qualifications or what they can offer you, and then after that, you look at the financial information, so.
Thank you.
And I believe if we're unable to reach an agreement with the, top choice, then the negotiations move on down the list until we're able to successfully negotiate. So we're not,
7, yes.
we're not locked into, number one choice that comes out of the interviews. Have a fair chance to negotiate, and if that doesn't work with them, then can move to the next one.
Can I just make a comment of
Yes.
how the Peaslee Building Committee uses its time tonight?
Yes.
I think what's really important is you get to a selection of the people you would like to invite for interviews next week. Spending more time on the interview questions is really essential, and making sure that the committee leaves tonight with really solid questions in preparation for next week. That is really important.
So there's a summary on the table that there are 3 firms that have emerged as top candidates. I guess I would open to this body, does anyone have anything that's wildly different from, is there, a lack of overlap, or you had an overlap? Are there any comments about and as a reminder, the firms that emerged from the aggregate scoring of this body is Colliers, PMA, and Vertex. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add that's additional to that?
And can I also
Yes.
just point out that it's a minimum of 3, so the committee, if they wanted to invite more than 3, has that option.
Thank you.
I had as my top choice left field, and the reason that I ranked them very highly is that I've worked with them on a project. Full disclosure there, but I feel like they warranted that ranking because they were one of the top firms that I have worked with on a great number of projects in terms of the depth of knowledge of their team, their professionalism, their ability to problem solve and deal with some very difficult project constraints and design challenges. So I ranked them, they were my top ranking.
Thank you.
Could I add a
Yes.
suggestion?
Yes.
So I think that the top 3 are fairly clear in terms of the consensus ranking, but then you have the 3, the 4th, 5th, and 6th. So you have Turner, Townsend, left field, and CHA. And when you look at the rankings, they're neck and neck. They're 86.67, 87.67, and 88.33. It might be worth discussing each of those potentially.
So I have experience with left field and CHA. I shouldn't say I directly. My firm has worked with CHA and left field. So I'm a big fan of reading the proposals and responding to those. Technically, that's what we are charged with basing our selection on. So it's hard for me to break from that and think about experience. And I think that as a town, like we've been very happy with Colliers. And so I have to say, I didn't think that they had particularly one of the strongest submissions, but they have done very well with the town. So this whole thing is like a really tough exercise in terms of how to balance what we're reading versus what we know. So part of me thinks we just choose the top three and have to put our sort of personal opinions aside, because I would have a tough choice between trying to choose between CHA and left field, honestly. They're both good firms. I mean, so I've worked with the top five, so I don't have a strong opinion really on whether or not we go below the top three.
I think I share a similar sentiment. I've worked with probably half of the firms on this list, and they're all qualified firms to help us manage and steward the resources that we have.
Welcome. We have a little chair set up for you.
Oh, great.
Yep.
Perfect. Sorry I'm late, everybody.
But just to echo what you were saying, I'm perfectly happy if we proceed with the top three, but the rest of the firms that we've discussed, even down to Turner, Townsend, are more than qualified to, I'd be more than happy to sit in a room, have the conversation, and to discuss what value add they can bring to the town in this process.
I mean, Turva is on this list, is one of my favorite OPMs. They did not score as high. I think that they have actually one of the most qualified project managers in the whole bunch. Their firm doesn't have as much MSBA work, but like they would be great too. So that's like, we could go back and forth, but I think to your point, I'm sort of contradicting myself. But the questions are going to be tough to come up with.
Yeah, and I do think that the task of the committee was to try to set aside, and I know it's really hard to do, to set aside all of your past experience and really look at the criteria and the proposal and match the criteria to the proposal and score it. Otherwise, it could be considered unfair because you're now adding another criteria to the evaluation process. So it's just as
I agree.
Lauren.
So as someone who was reading these proposals and thought it was in a foreign language,
although your kitchen project, you're probably like,
let me tell you, I wish I did this process for my kitchen project, let me just say. One thing that I had a question on was for CHA, since we're sort of talking about those like three next level proposals. They had mentioned that they don't have any subcontractors, and I just wanted to know more about how that compares to other proposals and whether that's a pro or a con or neither.
I can.
Go right ahead.
Well, so CHA does have a really great in-house estimating department. Sometimes we hire them just to do estimating, in fact. But at the same time, people like Colliers, PMA, Vertex, they have, a lot of people are using PMNC, for instance, as one of their estimators. There are sort of a group of estimators that these folks all go to that are also really good. I can tell you on the firehouse, for instance, Colliers used PMNC. The firehouse estimate came in exactly where it needed to be. I mean, in fact, the bids came out sort of evenly across a range. Ultimately, the lowest bid was 6 million and under, but that's kind of how it was structured. And the highest bid that was still within the range was exactly where PMNC and the designer estimate had reconciled. So I'm fine with internal or external, and that's true for other types of sub-consultants that the OPM may hire. That, like, some of them have educational planners, or that's not the best example, but they have different types of consultants that they want to bring in. Sometimes that just brings extra value with their team, so I think that's fine in all cases.
Okay, so it's not necessarily a pro or a con.
Exactly.
Okay.
and what will happen during interviews often, you'll hear one firm present and they'll have their team. And then members of that team are now part of the next interview because, for example, the educational consultant oftentimes, is the same person
Especially for the design,
for the,
yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
But that can be a very insightful question to ask during the interview process. Just tell them about the teams, about the staffing, about the resources that they have internally versus externally. Not to rank them or weight them, just to understand what the process will be like.
Yeah, and some of them you get that benefit, like if they have them on staff, they might not necessarily put them in, their cost proposal, but because you have those members, they have a really good MEP guy, or they have, educational consultant, or they have those resources that they can make a quick call to when they need some additional information to support the primary team member. So it can be benefit, but like estimating, there's lots of really good estimators out there, so.
It's one heck of a meeting to walk in the middle of. How are you doing, Mike?
Good, good.
Okay, welcome.
Yes,
Yep,
thank
okay.
you. Yeah, sorry I was late, I got hung up.
Yeah, okay.
I tried to sneak out of work, but it's a
Yes,
small
well,
office.
yeah. Thanks for joining. So we're just, we have aggregated scores that we did ranking over the weekend.
Right.
And considering the top 3, and we have a 45-minute interview slot beginning at 6 PM on Monday. So if we go 6 to 6:45, 7 to 7:45, 8 to 8:45, if we add a 4th, then that's a late night.
As a select board member, don't.
Okay, you're desensitized. Okay, yeah, what is late? Yep, okay, yep.
I mean, the other thing we had previously discussed, I believe, was that if we did 3, we could consider making the selection immediately following the interviews, correct?
Right. Right.
Setting aside, 45 minutes to half hour, 45
Right.
minutes to make that call that night.
Yep. And the interview date we've published is June 2. This body could decide to have a little extra time the following night if we needed to, but that's, right, I know, but that's our interview published, so, yes,
I'm for making a decision close to the interviews, because then people's faces and responses are kind of fresh in your mind, rather than coming back the next night and who said what, and I think it just leads to a better decision when we're right close to the interviews and it isn't, a day removed.
so having heard the conversation, thoughts about the respondents, an incredible list of applicants, there could be an opportunity for someone to make a motion about shortlisting the folks that are ranked at the top, and then the committee could discuss that motion.
I move that we shortlist the top 3 based on the votes that have, or on the rankings that have been submitted to Becky.
Is there a second? Okay, there's been a motion and second, and just for the meeting minutes, those firms are Colliers, PMA, and Vertex. Is there any discussion?
So we're pretty decided, like the rankings as submitted by the individual members, we're not going to go back and revisit those, that we're going to leave those as is at this point. And the discussion is, we take 3, 4, or 5, or however many we want. That's the direction we're moving at this point.
Well, it's up to the body, so if people, Rebecca, yes.
So the motion on the floor is to
Yes.
just take the top 3,
Yep,
not a 4th and a 5th. So that's the motion on the floor to be discussed.
So if we wanted to discuss it now, and Tristan, you convince us to amend the motion, we could do that. So convince us, Tristan.
Well, I've always, in conversation, I've said 3 is good, because we don't want to subject ourselves to a marathon of decision. And like others have said, these are all very good qualified firms. I've worked with probably half the list over the years. So it really does come down to the team that you get with any of them. My question was kind of back to what others had asked about at the beginning of the meeting is, are we discussing our weightings, or are we leaving them stand as is, and moving on to 3? Because I would be in favor of 3, just because I think we keep it focused.
Any other comments on the motion?
I would just say, I actually did not enter scoring just because it was above, I think, my knowledge and scope. But I think that the people who did score put a lot of time into this. And so I would trust that the scorings that were presented this evening reflect, I think the expertise in the room. So I would feel comfortable going with 3 as well, the top 3.
Any other discussion?
Just as a hypothetical, I'm aligned with your great, I agree with the number that you interviewed. Just reviewing the way I ranked, I had Vertex a little bit lower than this average, I believe, and I had left field a little bit higher than the resultant average. And that just, to me, it wasn't based on my experience. I think I've done one project with each of them, and they were both very qualified people, both at a project level and from a company, just good to deal with. Just the proposal as it was submitted, in my opinion, was a little bit more comprehensive. It was easier for me to digest the information, that's just how it came across for me. I'm not saying that we make that swap, but if I were to make a modification to this, I would have left field, I would swap 3 and 5 as it stands.
Thank you. And the motion on, so you're saying you would swap number 3 for number 5,
That is correct.
if you could amend your score? Or you've already input your score?
Those
Yes,
are
yep,
my
Yes, understood.
Just the result of the weighted average was different than what I had.
I think currently Vertex is number 3 and left field is number 4. That's with my notes.
Number 5.
Fourth, call, CHA,
For CHA and then.
88.3 versus left field's 87.67.
Okay, there's a motion on the table. Any other question or discussions, and is there any comment from Superintendent's office?
My rankings of those 2 were also similar. I mean, I already expressed that left field, I had a very positive experience working with them. Their proposal stood out to me, not just the folks that I've worked with, but their proposal did stand out as very well organized, very good experience working with the MSBA and linking the folks that they were proposing to the specific projects. Vertex I had ranked quite a bit lower, just based on their proposal, and then also based on project experience with them. So that's kind of out of order in the rankings, but I just wanted to let the body know that my ranking was similar of those 2, that I would prefer to see left field in the top in the group in place of Vertex.
So as a procedural, Rebecca, what have you done in terms of if there's updating of scoring? Do you have the ability to aggregate and update it if this body chose to do that tonight?
If they chose to modify their sheets, we could then go back and modify what I've done in terms of the compilation.
Does it auto-compile? Yes,
I think the question would be, is there enough time
right.
for anyone who had different rankings to go through and reevaluate the proposals to come up with a different weighted average for each person? So that is the question that I would ask.
Yep. And what have you done in the past in terms of, can you do like a real-time, if this body chose to do another update, can you do a real-time ranking, and also, I don't know if the members in this room, are we missing, do we have absentee scorers? I'm somehow drawing a blank.
Keith is not in attendance.
Okay, and Keith received, yep, okay. So we do have a member who was a scorer who's not present.
And I believe it would have to be the members would have to adjust their own scores. We can't just pick.
Right.
That is the purpose of the scoring.
So procedurally, if we are going to have three, we need to have it be the top three.
Well, that's the motion on the table.
I guess I'm struggling with this because, as I mentioned, if I were to look at this and score this based on my personal experience, I would have to rescore about 6 different firms. So, are we talking about rescoring them based on personal experience?
I think that that's part of the calculation. It's taking that proposal, how well did they address it? And as I scored it, when I looked at, how did the proposed team align with the things that we asked them to address, the feasibility study, drawing a blank right now because it's been a long day, but it wasn't based on one or the other. It was all part of that ranking for me, in that they responded well to, we have done grade level configuration studies on these different projects, and these people were associated with it. To me, that's a high ranking because we asked for that. And if I know those people and know their qualifications, unfortunately, that helps me rank them a little bit higher because I know that, yeah, they're going to do a good job. And that's ultimately, I think, what we're looking for is the A team.
With the number of people ranking, though, wouldn't you think that would be built in?
It could be, and that's why I'm one.
No, that's, I mean, that's a good
Yeah.
thing that you know these people, but that would also reflect in the aggregate score.
Yes.
Whether you purposely did it or not, there's a bias, but I think it's a good bias to have. It helps us.
I just think, just caution that the evaluation criteria has been vetted by MSBA, and it is supposed to be fair to all of the firms that applied. So I think that as each of you have looked at the proposal, your prior experience probably went into your weighting. But when you're now talking about, okay, you had this great experience, now I should consider that great experience as something would then influence my evaluation of the proposal, I think that's where you have to kind of be cautious.
So I guess this is where I'm coming from, because on the designer side, I know at the MSBA, and really all of the public work that I pursue, the designer selection panels are required to base their selection on the submission they've been given, and that alone. And I think I feel compelled to do that in this position. So I think I respect your decision, but I think I'm just going to keep my votes as is, so.
Yeah, I think that you might be opening yourself up if we are making alterations now, because we have all gone through and we've made our first, I think, attempt at ranking these firms. So I would caution the committee. However, if you needed to, I can certainly put a spreadsheet together and recalculate those, but I would caution you not to.
Thank you.
One question. So other than the personal experience level, I think I did hear some explanation as to the proposals themselves, why left field would be maybe preferred to bring in over Vertex. Could that be repeated? Just
Again, this is a personal preference on how a booklet is put together, but it was easier for me to follow and digest the information. Both firms presented very strongly, very similar information. The resumes, the qualifications of the people that were proposed on are A-level people. Short of bringing them in, sitting down and having a interview or bringing in the bias of a past project experience, if we're just going on the proposals alone, that's why those were flopped for me. It was easier to digest just a little bit graphically, I guess. So.
It was a nice looking proposal graphically. I really did like that.
Yeah.
But I think the challenge is, again, if you look at the top three that I selected and evaluated, it's Collier's, PMA, and left field. So I think, again, each person has had their evaluation and has made their kind of their evaluation, the criteria based on their facts and their information and how they viewed the proposal. So I don't think, no matter what top three, I don't think it's going to be unanimous. There's going to be people, if you look at the ranking, there's going to be someone who probably had a different top three, or maybe a different player in the top three. But the collective evaluation that happens and each person playing a role is where you get that aggregate, which does have some power.
Yes, certainly respect that.
Yeah, and I think that's what we opened the meeting with, like, what's our process? How are we going to do this? So I think this was a good discussion, and I will go along with the committee.
There's a motion and a second on the table. The motion is that the firms that emerged as the top ranking through aggregate scoring would be shortlisted, and those firms were Colliers, PMA, and Vertex. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll take a vote by show of hands. All those in favor of the motion to shortlist the three firms named, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstaining? Motion carries. Thank you. On your agenda, which we didn't print for you tonight, and I apologize for that, we move to new business, and as part of our remainder of our time tonight, we do need to discuss our interview questions. So, interview is Monday, and we have, as part of this big fat packet that you have here, we have spelled out our interview process, that each candidate will be allowed 45 minutes for interview, 30 minutes for a formal presentation, 15 minutes for predetermined questions by the committee, and that respondents will be provided with standard questions that have to be included in their presentations. And that once the interviews are complete, our committee will rate the shortlisted respondents using a scoring sheet specific to the interviews. So, Becky, do you want to go into detail on this sheet that we have here, and what kind of feedback are you looking for in terms of the questions?
Sure. So these are just draft questions for your consideration. They're not set in stone. Full disclosure, these were the questions that were used as part of the NERI building process, but it is something that we could use as a starting point. One thing that, when I spoke with MSBA, that they mentioned this morning is that we do need to make sure that we are asking the three firms all the same questions. So if we are planning to share these questions with the firms prior to their interview, and then we want to ask questions afterward, we would need to make sure that we are consistent in all of the questions that are being asked of the firms, whether it be the questions we're sharing or the questions we're asking after.
Is it typical to share your interview questions with the proposed bidders, or the interviewers?
I think that was something that came out of our conversation when we were working on the RFS, that was what we wanted to do in advance so that they were prepared. So we were giving them more time to present on it, and then less time for us to ask the questions after. So that was what came out of our conversations.
So can you remind us what the breakdown is of that 45 minutes? Because I think we have, is it 30 minutes presentation, 15 Q&A?
Yes.
Correct. Yes.
Yes. And so 30 minutes for a formal presentation and 15 minutes for predetermined questions by the committee. Respondents will be provided with standard questions that must be included in their presentations.
And there are no additional questions?
Following the presentation, the committee shall ask open questions from any committee member, it says.
What page are you on?
I am 6 of 22, and it is section 4 of the
Thank you.
process, selection process and selection schedule. So at the bottom part of section 4 is talking about the interviews. In an updated communication from MSBA, they have asked that the questions be standardized. It sounds to me like, if I'm understanding, that their request is that any questions asked to one firm be asked to all firms, so that it's not a individualized Q&A.
So we can or we can't ask additional questions?
You can ask clarifying questions.
Clarifying questions.
But we may want to have some questions that we provide to the firms in advance and then reserve some of these questions to ask after the interview. That's another
But just to
strategy.
clarify the clarifying question. So this is the NERI template.
Yes.
So if we were to update these, this would be provided to the people whom we are interviewing, incorporated into their proposals, and then following their presentation, 10, 15 minutes of, you said this, can I ask for clarification on what you meant by this? Is that in the right ballpark of my understanding?
You could do that, or we have 10 questions here. You could send them 5 and then reserve 5 for the 10 minutes after, although 10 minutes is not, or 15 minutes is not a long time, but that's another option.
I think part of the interview is how they synthesize the questions that you give and present it back. I think that's a really important for the building committee to see and observe.
So,
And full disclosure, having gone through the NERI building committee process and using these questions, I do think that these questions need to be, I'd recommend these questions be looked at very carefully.
I do think having some conversation around some of the points that you all have brought up in terms of staffing availability, communication and information sharing when it comes to notifying the community and keeping the community informed and engaging stakeholders, those would be nice to have as live discussions. We have a limited 15 minutes of time, but there might be some that we reserve for live conversation.
I have a question. So they're doing a presentation, but then we're giving them the questions. Are we giving them an outline of the presentation because we want to know about their community engagement plan, we want to know their staffing plan? Are we also directing the content of the presentation?
I think that was somewhat the idea, was that we give them things that we want.
agenda.
An agenda. Things that we want to hear about and how they would address it for us. But then we also want to put them on the spot a little bit and keep some of those reserved questions, because it's easy, it's kind of easy to be polished sometimes if you have time to rehearse, but, catching people off guard, that's what happens in construction. So what happens?
No,
Just for you,
never.
So, how do they react as a team, as, a firm, to challenges when they come their way?
So I do think 1A, past performance, is a good question to provide ahead of time because it frames some of the experience that they would bring.
Yes. And I would like to specifically ask, and I saw some firms do it in their proposals and some not. It's very easy, I've been on the other side, so I know how it's done, to go into people's resumes and cherry pick projects that the firm has done. But I'm interested in seeing what have you, Mr. Project Manager, which projects have you specifically worked on with this team that are similar to ours? Not that someone in Ohio has done, or, what have you specifically been involved with, and what were its challenges and successes? And the second part of that question is one that maybe we keep for the live part. Ask them to share an example of a project, a partnership that worked really well. Examples that they could bring, techniques that they would bring and use for our project. And then some other ones that didn't go so well. Where's your dirty laundry? What didn't work? What did you learn from it? How can that apply to us?
Yeah, I'd really like to hear about the black eyes, right?
They happen.
Right, exactly. I think you get more out of that than you do the successes, because those are easier to sell, so.
The one recommendation to the chair is to add grade configuration of consolidation
yes.
as a specific piece of information you want to hear about.
I agree. I think that could be part of the presentation we ask for ahead of time, is that what is your specific experience with grade configuration, and walking through the education consultation on that.
But I think you could
Yes.
weave it into past performance and just add it as, you talk about in scope of Peaslee project, including the building size, grade configuration, it can be embedded in that question.
And just reading the tea leaves of, town sentiment and politics, this could be a very sticky issue in, coming to a conclusion and then getting support behind it in town. So
So the second part of it, I think if I'm following, the information campaign and the way that all stakeholders are engaged. So that might be worth, I don't know. Yeah, comm strategy is 1B. So maybe those two, 1A and 1B, are for them to lead with in their presentation.
yeah, I think if town meeting and recent things have shown us anything, it's that we need to begin with the end in mind and begin knowing that we're going to have, we're going to need to do a lot of outreach, public education, and making sure that people in town feel like they're a part of this, that they are well-informed, and therefore, when we ask for their vote, that it's not a surprise and that's not the first time they're hearing about it, that it's the road has been paved long before we get to that.
And that people are being heard
Yes.
throughout. So I almost wonder, Rebecca, if there's an opportunity on 1B to beef that up with some more cues or prompts, examples of past campaigns, talk about the staffing allocation specifically to PR and communication. And,
I
yes.
think this is a question that I would ask differently from
Yeah.
the rebuilding committee to now. And to Tristan's point, I would be very specific about a project where communication went well, and a project where communication did not work well, and why.
So could you go ahead.
So I just think this is a question where it's so important in terms of the success of this project, that the OPM and the people we're working with can communicate well. So I think, just to your point, making it more specific and less broad is important.
Some other components, so we're talking about putting more substance into 1B, but that would be examples of campaigns, examples of strategies that went well or didn't go well, and lessons learned. Other prompts.
One of the proposals they did every 6 weeks, like a mini town meeting for anyone in the community, and that
Stood
kinda caught
out,
my
right?
eye
It
as a pretty
stands
good
out, yes.
Pretty good idea.
Professional videography, so what, yes. So does that,
Which one it was, but it caught my eye.
Yeah,
So we- yeah.
listening sessions, I think, not just broadcasting of information, but also information gathering, because there's will be a lot of opinions and a lot of stakeholders in town, and I think it's important that people know that, yeah, we've been heard along the way, and our comments have been incorporated into the thought process.
I'd like to know how they engage the designer in that process as well, because it's not just the OPM.
True.
And the OPM should not be presenting the design. So,
And I would add that the OPM and the designer can create a lot of space for input and feedback. But because you create the space doesn't mean people are going to show up to that space. So how do you create a true engagement? How do you meet people where they are, where they're at? Not just say, we're having a listening session every 6 weeks. And that might be a great idea.
it's a whole
but
campaign.
It
They
is,
have to develop the campaign.
it's much more comprehensive.
Yeah.
So I think, to your point there, one of the things we ask is for, like, let's have an example of a past, can they present on the past campaign that they did, and what were all the mediums that they used to accomplish that? Which worked well, which didn't work well? Because if somebody says, yeah, we just put out a bunch of Facebook posts and we're gonna put it on the project website, what's the real effectiveness of that? You have to.
Customize it to the community, the project.
The other thing that will happen is this is a long project. So the information that we know here and now and what we're reacting to will change over time as we move through different phases. So it's not only what's the comprehensive plan, but how have you adapted your communication strategy to meet the moment they're in.
In those years, people will come to the town, people will leave the town, there'll be cycles.
Are there any of these questions, based on past experience, or any folks in the room that could be eliminated?
Just one I noticed, like the building code knowledge. I mean, I guess maybe we have to ask that, but it's like, why would they be here if we didn't?
We don't have to ask that.
Right. I mean,
Yeah, take it out.
Exactly. Why would they be
They're all-
here if they didn't know it?
They're all gonna say, we have licensed people on staff, they're familiar with the building code, it's, yeah.
Right.
Scratch that.
Isn't the design professional of record who's stamping the drawings responsible for the code?
And the contractor who we're not hiring yet.
Everybody has
Okay, so it's, yeah.
And then, I will circle back to a point that you made in the opening of this, which I resonated with. It's the availability of the staffing. So is that a question that we would maybe choose to ask live of all firms?
No, I would put that, they need to bring the people that they're going to say, this is, Julia, and she's gonna work 16 hours a week, and this is Fred, and he's gonna work 24 hours a week, and
100%.
they need to be able to talk about it. So I think that goes under 6 or 4.
Well, it's 5 or 7 that are missing on here right now.
Oh.
Yeah, well, right?
No, yeah, that's right, yeah, that's what we're looking at, yes.
Right, but
Yep,
five was team and
Yep.
7 was workload.
Yep,
Oh, sorry.
so capacity and skills,
Yes, so capacity and skills or management approach.
so, yes.
Yeah, so I think too, what is, for me, when I think of the management approach, it's like, what is an effective, how do you define an effective team? What are the qualities of effective team? How do you see that team supporting the work? So
That's a better way to phrase the
getting
question.
more specific around kind of the management approach versus what are the qualities of the team? And how do you approach the work as a team in terms of
And
making sure it's successful?
And I think one of the nuances of that is, who are we going to see when? Like, don't just have this person and then have them stop and then send us another person and then they stop,
And maybe the question could be, how do you ensure continuity of the team?
Exactly.
So, are we keeping we have 4 and 6. Are you proposing that those are still separate items? But can you just repeat, so you're thinking to reword management approach? And there was a better way to say that?
The
Was that like how you build your team more
You
than?
describe a highly effective
Right.
team.
You have that, Rebecca?
Say it. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I also had, how do you ensure the continuity of the team?
Sort of like a two-part.
But then maybe we just have a statement that says, please provide the hours per each staff per phase, each team.
And
per phase.
there were one or two that did that in their booklet, and it was so much easier to understand
Yes.
when they kind of put it in a grid in terms of
Yes.
feasibility, design, construction, closeout, and they put, this person is, full-time. This person is half-time, and that's kind of what we're looking for, is what is your time commitment for these people?
Exactly.
Do you want that as a separate question under key personnel?
I
Since
think
that's
it's just a
criteria
statement
5?
In that.
And maybe we
as a
can even ask,
follow-up.
maybe asking, who is on our team? Like, who are you proposing is on our team?
Right.
And then the continuity, so you have,
But I do think we want like a staffing plan of hours. Please provide the staffing plan.
And why do you, here's,
The two of us
here's-
really want
here's
hours.
the foot-
You know,
here's the
we want
footnote.
lots of hours.
And why did you choose this person for our team versus somebody else at your firm? Why are they better, why is this person the right fit for Peaslee?
Just to clarify, are we asking for the key personnel to attend the interview?
Yes.
I mean, it just says, present your key personnel.
No, typically, we would want, like the project director, who will be the executive,
Yeah, the
senior
full-
project manager, the clerk. It's way down
We
the,
don't always know the clerk at
Yeah,
this point,
that's a tough
though.
one to find.
Like
Maybe not.
Colliers will not,
but that's a key person when we get to construction.
they won't know. I'm not saying Colliers, it's just that they're at fault for not knowing. That was the case on the firehouse, and it was okay. They just don't know the staff.
That might be a bonus to somebody who does and presents a strong candidate.
There are 10 reasons that they can't know that, and you know that.
So can someone summarize, we're looking at the management approach question. So embedded in that question is talking about specific staffing, or do we want it as two different things?
I think that can be all one topic.
The only reason why I bring that up is with the criteria. Under the key personnel, it does specifically describe the time commitment, experience, and references for these key personnel. So I didn't know if that should be a separate question since it relates to that criteria in the RFS.
It could be. You can break it up in order to meet the two separate criteria.
So this is what I have right now based on what you've all discussed. Management approach, describe a highly effective team. How do you ensure the continuity of the team? And then for key personnel, who are you proposing for our team? Why are these the appropriate people for this project? And what will each person, and this is, I will make this grammatically correct, what will each person's time commitment be?
Can we say, what will each person's time commitment be per phase?
Yes, because it will change a lot.
So we're proposing to add one, and sorry, can someone summarize one more time for the management approach? What's the metric that we're evaluating there? Is what does an effective team look like? Their response to that?
And how do you ensure the continuity of the team?
And can we be more specific? Continuity of the team, meaning?
Across the whole project?
Between
phases of
project
the project?
phases.
Like so some OPMs will structure their teams so that somebody just works on feasibility, and like they might be good at the programming phase and just getting it to town vote, and then they just disappear. And so we want somebody that's gonna stick around, so it's just kind of gauging their involvement in that, that
So
type of thing.
could you add continuity of the team throughout the duration of the project? We're adding a question 5, key personnel. Are there any other, on this template here, do we need to ask specifically questions 8 and 9? Are those good to keep in for grading? Yes.
For question 8, do we
Yes.
want to, if we're going to keep that, should we expand that to, what is your experience with LEED versus the CHIPS program, it's LEED, right?
Well, I wouldn't recommend CHIPS personally, having had to like do all the documentation for it. But again, they've all done both of them. It's not, there's nothing that's going to distinguish one firm from another, so I don't think it's worth our time.
So what
This is
questions,
more of a designer.
next phase,
Next
our
phase,
next
yeah.
individual. So are we proposing question 8, lead knowledge could be removed from the questions?
If anything, I would want to know what their involvement would be during the submission processes. Because we have, I know they don't have to do anything, but sometimes it's nice to have a fresh set of eyes just to be like, okay, design submission, here's the timeline for it. Construction submission, here's the timeline for it. What are the outstanding items on each? Like, just somebody to bird dog.
Someone who knows the process, so they can ensure that it's being done by the people who are supposed to be
But isn't that what your lead consultant does?
supposed to. Not all.
Would we want to ask any questions about, oh, sorry, about, I'm just looking at the criteria, and it does say ability to assist in grant applications for funding. I don't think anyone answered that question in their proposal. I didn't see anything there. Is that something we want, what is your knowledge of alternate funding sources for, green energy? How would you assist us through that process?
Good question.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, my question was going to be more around their attitude, their perspective, how they see sustainability as a general topic. Do they think it's important that we are, whether these are required or optional, but, are they a proponent of green energy, sustainable solutions, doing a net zero energy building? I think their attitude toward it is somewhat enlightening.
What are the MSBA requirements for that? As far as like what goes into a final building, as far as,
Yeah, and that's the designer will bring a team of experts, and there's some flexibility in terms of decisions the Peaslee Building Committee will need to make in terms of what it's going after.
To your question, I'm not sure if the town of Northborough is.
Yeah, like, I don't believe.
Net zero building.
Yeah, and I think we're a town that doesn't have any green goals,
We
shockingly
do have
enough.
some.
But,
We're, I guess.
like, for public buildings,
Right.
like, we don't have by 2040, every public building is going to be net zero energy, right? We don't have a goal like that.
I think we're a green community. But that's different.
And I believe some of the requirements of what MSBA or code will require will be different if we're talking about a renovation and addition, or if we're talking about a brand-new building. There's different, because then you have LEED for schools, or you have LEED for renovations. I don't know if LEED for schools applies to renovations.
So I'm wondering if some of this technical material is better suited for when the designer comes in versus at this stage.
To Kevin's point,
Yes.
it might be worth just getting a sense of the, again, not firm experience,
Yes.
but team experience of, what projects that were what level of lead, energy efficiency, or what's been their experience with it.
So, just to back out for a second, is this a make it or break it for selecting our OPM relative to some of these other questions?
The scores that are aggregated following the interview, similar to today,
Still include a question, need to include a question from this criteria?
well, I don't think they don't map one-to-one with this, right? But they do, but we will be ranking, we'll go through another round of scoring following the interview. So we need to be thinking about point allocation.
Yeah,
It's weighting too. It's not,
understood.
that doesn't need to carry.
The biggest weight, yes?
I mean, I like your line of thought around what is the OPM's role in terms of
Sustainable.
sustainable initiatives, and how do you lead and guide a committee?
We'll write that down, Rebecca.
Yeah.
The other question that I think is really important to ask is that there will be a time when the Peaslee Building Committee is not satisfied with the OPM. Like, I've never been on a project where it's just gone perfectly. And I would like to I think it's important for the committee to hear what happens when there's conflict between the OPM and the building committee. What has that conflict looked like, and how has it been resolved?
So Greg, on question number 6, capacity and skills, we have this draft that says the district is interviewing 4 firms. We would interview 3. But I wonder if there's an opportunity to add that, what are the strengths of your firm? And, how would you propose to resolve conflicts that arise? Is that an appropriate place to add it, do you think, categorically?
I think as a subset, maybe a 6A, because I think the balance, what the talking point is going to give them for this, our firms tell us all these wonderful things about your companies. It's an opportunity for them to showcase their skills and to follow up immediately and say, well, where have you guys had some conflict? Where's the turbulence going to be? It's kind of just hitting them right away.
That's a skill.
It is a skill. I would like them to be able to present what their skills are in a positive light, and then as a follow-up question to that, say, okay, we talked about this, could you clarify maybe something that maybe hasn't gone as well? So one, to Kristen, to your point, to kind of catch them off guard, not punitively, but to see how they think on their feet and give an example of a conflict, what it was about, frame it for us, and then what resolution, if any, occurred. That would be my recommendation on how to.
So you're saying to leave that, potentially leave question 6 as a live question versus submitting it to them ahead of time for their presentation?
Yes, however, is that really a clarifying question?
I like the idea of questions up front, positive, like show us, synthesize all of the things we want to hear about. The scripted questions we do not give, or the committee does not give, are more around, okay, thanks for that wonderful information. Tell us about a time where you struggled working with a committee. And how did you resolve it? Whatever the questions might be. The questions where most likely they're not going to be quick. It's easy to talk about the great things that have happened in the projects. The questions that are hard are sometimes specific examples where you had to work through conflict.
What is the group's thought about questions 9 and 10? How should they be weighted, and are they good distinguishing questions between the firms, or do they not provide?
I think you can take 10 off, personally.
Respectfully disagree. I think commissioning's a really interesting story to tell, especially where a lot of the buildings in Northborough are not super technically complicated at this point. You're going to have an automation system in the building that needs a lot of coaching. We'll need a lot of coaching to get up and ready.
Isn't that the commissioning agent who does most of that, and working with the contractors and stuff to tune the system to work right? The OPM's just going to say, go get it done, make it perform right.
The MSBA is looking for.
Yeah, I'm just saying into the mic, sorry, yes.
Sorry. So when it comes to building automation systems, and this is probably not what you were dealing with in Westboro, but generally speaking, they do not want complex building automations in their buildings because they have a lot of districts where people get these really fancy automation systems and no one knows how to operate them. But I'm not debating what you're saying about the importance of commissioning. I think it's good to leave that, but it's to a point.
And what do you mean by automation systems, exactly?
You can explain this better than I can.
We have all these, we have all the fancy technology. You'll have a lighting control system.
Okay, so lighting,
You'll have-
HVAC, all that stuff.
Yes, so a lot of the code requirements right now are going to be some sort of advanced heat exchanging system, whether it's a ground source heat pump or an air source heat pump or a water cool, for all these different types. Right. So what are the computer programs that control all of that? So you're going to design this very technically advanced building to meet all these energy codes. If it doesn't work as it designed, what ability do you have to change it? So that's the purpose of the automation system. You can change the mechanical components of it.
I'd be more interested in hearing their experience with complicated systems and their guidance to simplify them, to work, to make them user-friendly for us as a town in the long term. Like, what success have you seen in complicated systems being easy to use? You know, how can you guide the designer or the contractor to install those type of systems?
But the MSBA has a very robust commissioning requirement. They have a whole, like, group of commissioning agents that they sort of pre-approve that are required on all of the projects. So the OPMs have to be very familiar, this is why it's a criteria, have to be very familiar with the group of consultants that do that work and make sure that they go through the proper MSBA protocols for commissioning at the end of the project. So I think that's why it's considered an important criteria from the MSBA point of view.
And it's not just building automation systems. It's also, like I said, envelope. So where now there's so much focus on, the tightness of buildings, both air and watertight, sick buildings if you have leaks, that's a very important part of it in making sure that the commissioning agent is working with the architect up front to iron out those details, and then that they're tested during construction. So they're actually doing testing of the vapor barriers and the windows and all of these things to make sure that they're performing as designed. So I think having an OPM that fully understands that and is familiar with that to make sure that it's happening. They're not doing the testing, but they're making sure that it is being done and recorded, and their eyes and ears, they're our eyes and ears on the project when we can't be there. So they're making sure that when people sign off on it, yes, it's correct.
Thank you. Rebecca, how many pre-supplied questions do you have in the template at this point that you're looking at?
So I've made adjustments to 1A, 1B, and I can read them. I've crossed out 2, which is the building code. I've adjusted management approach and added key personnel. We have capacity and skills, lead knowledge, and then I wasn't sure on the 9 and 10, the life cycle and the building commissioning, if we were planning to retain those questions.
I also don't want, okay, we've added grade configuration, so we covered that in 1, and then there was a discussion about adding grant familiarity with other alternate funding sources. And I guess a good thing to talk about would be which questions do we prioritize for live questions, and we only have 15 minutes. So, I mean, if we're asking and they've got 2 or 3 minutes per question, that's not very many. Maybe it's, maybe it's 3 or 4, right?
At most.
So what would be important, what does this group want to hear in real time, sort of not pre-supplied?
Conflict resolution.
Yes, yeah. Because to Greg's point, there will be thorny issues that come up either in design, during construction, and it could be between any of the parties, the committee, the OPM, the architect, the builder. Our OPM, it's really important that they maintain, calm, even approach to things, because they represent us. They represent our best interests. So if the architect and the contractor are having disputes, the OPM
Does that ever happen?
never.
Okay, good.
But they represent us, so whatever they do should be in our best interest.
Do you have material for?
Do you want me
yes.
to read what I have so far?
I think for that live question, but before you read it, what other live questions? So we have one about conflict resolution. That was a big consensus from this group. What else would be good to ask in real
Like
time?
the staff details, who's going to be working on the project, who are these people, are they in the room right now, right? Because, I mean, all these companies are going to, on paper, be able to do anything we ask of them, right? They're going to have to come here and sell themselves and see who we want to work with, who we seem to have who we can get along with, and therefore they can get along with other people and move the project along.
It could appear as a pre-supplied question, but also a standard clarifying question of, can you elaborate on the staff in,
I think that one needs to be a pre-supplied, because we
Why?
want them to make sure they're bringing those individuals
Right.
there. I think that one's okay.
pre-supplied?
I think a live question opportunity is around the campaign and community engagement. I know we have that, yes, but I think there's going to be clarifying questions just because I think it is a potential pain point that we're experiencing right now. How do we improve that?
Lauren?
And maybe we frame it that way, as like, this is a pain point, potential pain point that we foresee in Northborough. What other towns or projects have you worked with where it's been, you've had a kind of a difficult road ahead of you, but explain to us your process and what worked and what didn't, and how would you adapt that to our project?
And even feed into that, because the design team and the other teams are going to be big parts of how we tell the story and frame up what we are putting out there. So I know we're not interviewing everybody at the same time, but what is their part in how we present this to the
What is
public?
your role, you got that? What is your role in the information campaign, engaging stakeholders? And could you provide examples of other communication campaigns that have gone well or where you've had challenges that you worked through? So we talked about conflict resolution, we talked about PR or some kind of communication. Lauren, you had your hand.
Yeah, I just don't know if we want to be even more specific with that question, and maybe be more pointed about asking specifically, what will your role, or what strategies will you use in order to bring confidence and clarity to the town meeting process to get this project passed?
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if we want to be that pointed.
I don't know if there's a way, I didn't even know if it's a question, but we kind of bake it into the culture. Anyone that sat through this year's contentious town meeting and the Neary situation, I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure we all want value for the kids' education, but also value in the building itself. And I don't know if it starts with us or the OPM, but to really push cost control all the way through the process. Because Greg indicated we're 3, 4, 5-year process, and we just can't keep let it incrementally increasing in costs, and then that's most of the PR issues come right back to costs and how do we contain costs? It's probably not up to us directly, but we can kind of instill a feeling that we want a good bang for our buck, because it's going to be expensive no matter what we say. But if we can confidently, as a committee and all the way through the process, thinking we've gotten a good product, it's much easier to defend. So I don't know if that's a question or how to.
I was thinking about this a minute ago, actually, just based on the firehouse experience. Talking about how the OPM works with the designer on cost from the beginning. I think that there's still a misunderstanding that we don't start this process with a budget. We understand the needs of the project and what that costs, and that's what you're working with. But from there, you can shape a design process, and the OPM is involved in that, where, there are different methodologies like target value design, and like there are lots of different like ways that you can work through the design process, but the OPM can be a big part of that, and how the design process moves along and what the checkpoints are and how you work with your cost consultant. So maybe we could craft a question about that. I don't know. I'm
And
adding more.
I did notice one of the applicants too, they said they were good at, I don't know how they did it, or the terminology used. When you go to state of Massachusetts for reimbursement, there are ways of including things that may or may not be reimbursed, or
Yeah.
shading it so it is or it isn't. And I think that's an area we should explore with the OPM, I would think, but,
Designer does that too.
yeah.
So
But that's an avenue, right, for
it
cost
sounds like
containment.
there's some consensus around a third question. We talked about conflict resolution, PR, and then cost analysis and strategic design throughout the process.
All the way through. It's gonna be continuous.
Yeah.
Yes.
The most,
Like if we frame, if we frame the presentation positive, to me, the opposite is, and I don't know how many OPMs experience this, a failed vote at the town meeting.
They've all experienced it.
So I'd love to, one question to consider is, what has, have you experienced a failed vote, and what role do you think the OPM played in that failed vote?
Great question.
So what is this group, how many questions does this group want to provide ahead of time? And what does your working template say now?
3 times speed, we should be able to get through. Let's talk fast.
So I have 8 regular questions and then 3 live questions.
Okay.
What I think are live questions.
And Greg just made a statement about a failed vote as a potential 4th question that this group could consider. When we look, so that would be 8 and then 4. When we look at, they have half an hour for their presentation. Is 8 questions appropriate?
I think by the time you get through introductions, I think that's, half hour goes really quick. in
Right.
that Presentation.
I mean, could we carve that down at all? Do we want to?
Well,
Could I read what I
Yes,
have?
yes.
and
Yes,
then
I was gonna say, I don't even know
Yes,
what's.
Maybe there's something. All right, so the first for past performance, please provide examples of the project your firm has managed that are similar in scope to the Peaslee project, including the building size, adherence to budget, adherence to schedule, and grade configuration/consolidation studies. And then period. And then that last sentence, please share examples of a project that went exceptionally well and a project with challenges and how you navigated adherence to budget and schedule in both situations. Are we okay with that, or do we want to make any?
my thought with that was the please share examples of the project, that could be the live question piece
Okay.
of that.
but if they're gonna wanna share it with graphics and statistics, and that's hard to, I mean, that's a 5-minute answer right there.
Carve the conflict stuff out of that.
The last part, which I think is what you were talking
Oh,
about,
yeah.
Christian,
the-
So strike
Project with
my
challenges.
comment and we'll continue on and see where we land.
That's not the point.
Okay, second?
Okay, second. Working relationship, please provide an overview of your communication strategy in all phases of the project with all stakeholders. How do you engage the designer in that process? Please, and I think that we may have also created some live questions that are similar to this. Please provide examples of projects that went well and didn't go well and lessons learned. And again, wordsmithing needs to be done with these.
I think, in the spirit of trying to narrow down the list, you can skip the designer piece of that. I think you could probably nix that one,
Okay.
unless somebody else feels strongly about it.
Nix the entire question or nix?
Yeah, I mean, we have too many questions. Let's try to get rid of some.
Similar to the first one.
Okay. Then we crossed out the building code knowledge. Under management approach, describe a highly effective team. How do you ensure the continuity of the team throughout the duration of the project? And strike the rest of the question that was originally proposed.
Okay, so are we at 3 questions or 2 questions so far?
We're at 2.
We're at 2, okay.
Okay, and then we added key personnel. Who are you proposing for our team? Why are these the appropriate people for this project? And what will each person's time commitment be per phase? So that's question 3.
Okay,
Capacity and skills. The district is interviewing 3 firms for the OPM role. What value add would your firm bring to the district? Describe in detail what you consider the strengths of your firm from a skill set. And then I crossed off the rest. So I may have missed something in that conversation.
we talked about adding conflict resolution
I have that down below.
But that's a live question, right, so I think you could strike that. And when you say what value add would your firm bring, I think what distinguishes your firm that, you know, is specific to your firm, something like that, yeah.
What does that tell us? Like, what,
One more time.
The district is interviewing 3 firms for the OPM role. What distinguishes your firm? I had, what value add would your firm bring to the district? And then describe in detail what you consider the strengths of your firm from a skill set perspective.
So it is very subjective. It's a basically a purely subjective question, right? I don't know about it then.
Well, and the prior question was about the team.
Yeah.
And you've asked them to present their team, tell us what
Right.
the strengths are of the team members,
Right.
which is who we're getting.
Right.
So it's sort of a repeat.
It's redundant.
Redundant.
Would this group, would there be a consensus to remove that question? Yeah,
I think so.
it's redundant. Okay,
Do they know anywhere else that we are condensing the list down to 3?
This is a public meeting right now.
yeah, they know everything. If they watch
one of the
our
firms.
lovely faces.
Should be.
Yep, yes. Okay, so I'm sorry, what are we at 3 questions pre-supplied?
3, yes.
Okay, what else?
All right, the next would be the lead knowledge, and we have what is the OPM's role in terms of sustainability initiatives?
I mean, is that a make or break
I guess
question?
what's the right answer to the question? I think I still like the idea of a question like this, but what's the answer where we're gonna be like, yay, wow, that's a great answer.
do you want to ask the question in a way that they have to speak to a specific example?
That always, a story always is better than, we will do estimates, we will, you know, those were the proposals that kind of were bland, were the ones that, yeah, we have experts. The ones that said, here was a project, here were the features of it, here's the story, that brings it to life. So I think tying it to a specific, again, that's why we keep asking, good and bad examples, because you can learn from both.
Do we ask them to highlight a project that they've worked on recently, you know, that involves sustainability initiatives? Like-
Where the OPM played a significant role in the design and achievement, or not.
Or you could even just say open it, what role did the OPM play in this?
You know, it might be, I mean, just to make it more interesting, to have them talk about a renovation project where they did that, because it's easy to make a new building sustainable.
Yeah, that's true.
Someone mentioned grants earlier, you know, just understanding how they, because that would be an OPM potentially led thing. A budget, the first thing that's going to be on the table is, oh, we can't afford to make it net zero energy, but if we can do it for free, we might want to do it.
And maybe that alternate funding could tie into our third live question, which was cost. You know, can you describe your cost consulting and strategy throughout the duration of the project and experience with alternate funding sources?
I too think that the OPM will have a role to play in working closely with MSBA around the points we get for reimbursement. So that is where the knowledge of if we do X, then we can see % increase in terms of the reimbursement amount. And I think that's a key role the OPM plays.
Rebecca, I'm guessing you have questions 9 and 10 on your list. Is there any consensus from this group? Are those good scorable questions, life cycle cost analysis and building commissioning? Is there any room there to eliminate any of those?
I personally like both of those.
Okay,
In life cycle cost analysis, because there's 2 costs we're going to be looking at here. There's, what is the project going to cost us, you know, in a couple years when we build it, and then be paying off for many years. But then what's the operating, what is the trade-off, what is the operating cost? And it's not just utility cost, it's also maintenance of finishes and other, things in the building. Is it easily maintained by the district staff? Or is it something that nobody has seen before or dealt with, or is going to need painting every other year? That is a definite conversation that we want to look at. Just because it is cheaper to build first cost doesn't mean it's the right thing long-term, and vice versa.
And how many questions are we at now? Pre-supplied? 6. Okay, and then the 7th would, and what's the consensus on building commissioning?
If we add like an operations component to the question, I feel like maybe that, I'd be more in favor of that, I suppose.
Such as?
Well, just, the commissioning is about making sure it's operating right. But, the bigger question that was brought up before was making sure that we're not being handed keys to a car we don't know how to drive, right? It's like making sure that the operations has been considered in the entire process.
Yeah, I think the way the question is written now is it's asking them to sell us on why we should have commissioning, but that's not really what we're asking. We're asking them, what is your role as the OPM in ensuring that the commissioning process provides useful information to the town, the committee, the school department, and that it's executed well.
You get that, Rebecca?
I wasn't typing, so if you can repeat that. Sorry
Building
about that.
commissioning, so what is your role in?
Instead of, describe the subcommittee, the purpose of the consultants, what is the OPM's role, and what projects have you, let's see, I've lost it already.
What was the OPM's role in commissioning, not only from, where do we get the value out of commissioning?
Where have you brought value as an OPM to the commissioning process?
Yes,
Yes.
Get that?
I think you said that earlier.
something like that.
Where did you, as the OPM, bring value to the commissioning process?
Wordsmithing is not my forte.
Yes?
I hate to add another question, but can we just talk about something we haven't talked about tonight,
Yeah.
really? Is the 310 versus 625,
Yeah,
option 1 and option 2. And I don't really understand where the OPM is involved in that decision, in that process, and that fork in the road that's going to happen at some point.
They're one of many parties that are involved. I think we are actually mentioning that in question number 1, where we ask about their experience. We do make a nod to show us a project you've done where there's been a grade reconfiguration study.
Okay.
But you're gonna have the OPM, you're gonna have the designer who's hopefully done one, and you're gonna have an educational planner who will absolutely have done many of them.
Yeah, I'm
So we
imagining the
included it-
town meeting, right? And the first question's going to be like, did you study these differences? And we've gone down a path so far, right? We've gone a year or two down option B or option A, and it's going to really have to be like super defendable, super logical, with all the data to support why it's going to be better as an experience for students, or it's going to save the district money, or whatever it is. Like, there's going to be the case that's being built around that decision is like a really big deal.
so in question 1, we're very specific, right? Please highlight your work with grade
Please
configuration.
provide examples of the projects your firm has managed that are similar in scope to the Peaslee project, including the building size, adherence to budget, adherence to schedule, and grade configuration/consolidation studies.
Okay.
I wonder if it's connected to also the communication plan.
Yeah,
That it's how do you,
Choice.
yep, could do it
Build a
twice.
campaign
Yeah, it's
around
important
whatever.
enough to, so are you at 7 questions, Rebecca?
I'm at 6.
You're at
Sorry,
6.
the building commissioning was number 6, so.
Okay.
Yep.
So we're proposing to pre-supply 6 questions, and then we have 3, maybe 4 live questions. Can you read the live
So
questions?
this is what I have. So
Okay.
hopefully I've captured them all. Tell us about a time when you struggled with a building project. How did you resolve any conflicts with the parties involved? What is your role in the information campaign, engaging stakeholders? And can you provide examples of other campaigns? Sorry, some of this I was typing as people were talking. What is your role in making this successful at town meeting? And then, have you experienced a failed vote? What role did the OPM play in that failed vote?
We make that the first live question, just for Greg.
Yes, that's fine. I think we also had one that we talked about, which was about cost, sort of just talking about cost analysis and consulting through the whole project, including any experience with alternate funding sources. Is that,
I think we brought up that
It went in one of them.
sustainability piece.
Yeah.
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 Okay, so the alternate funding, we want to keep just into the sustainability? Okay,
That's our most likely,
okay,
that's the best chance
Okay.
we have of alternative.
okay.
Do we have any really open-ended questions that we can ask them, like, what do you see as the biggest challenge? Or something, just something where it's like, everything feels very targeted and we're kind of feeding them the answer right with the question? Like, is there anything, so that we can learn in a way too? Like, what do they see as the biggest risk?
I was
What are they-
thinking of that, so,
Yeah.
instead of, there are questions that are gonna come up during the interview that we're gonna wanna ask for our live questions, I would think, instead of preparing every one of our live questions too.
I don't know if we're allowed to ask those, though.
Why we wouldn't be.
Clarifying
Just
question.
clarifying questions.
Clarify.
Clarifying only, okay.
You know what I mean? Because maybe they're gonna say something, you're gonna go, wait a minute, and then it would be a follow-up that we haven't thought of right now. I guess that's allowed, right? It would have to be allowed.
Clarifying questions. But,
But how to balance them with respect to the time constraint we have. That's going to be what we're up against.
An open-ended question, to your point, could be, what do you see in the next year or two
oh,
in terms of any unique challenges with moving this type of work forward? Just
Or it's 2025, why are we still talking about implementing 21st century learning?
Yeah.
Those kinds of
Yeah.
questions. We should all have done it already, those things.
I mean, I do think commenting on, we're in the changing times, right? There are a lot of changes happening economically, so that might be a good open-ended, we're at a lot now, though. This would be our fifth open-ended question. We just don't have the time for it. But if we were, I think, there are rising costs and changing economic landscape. So how are you looking at that? And how would you shepherd us through that?
I think that's a good question for the design team and the building team. What materials are we specifying? What geographies are we specifying them from? It goes into life cycle costing. It touches every part of the design and building process. So I don't know that the OPM is going to have the magic answer for us. We can get insight from it.
And I think the continuity question gets at that too, that, the duration of a project, there's always going to be changing conditions, whether it's economic or in the building trade. So I think that continuity does get at some of that unknown.
So in your continuity question, including language about, do we have, through changing conditions, do we have that language in there? Can't even find the question now. All right, so we have 6 and then 4, maybe 5, if we had an open-ended. Can we offload some of our live questions back into the pre-supplied questions?
So these were the 4, I think, because,
Okay,
let me read, have you experienced a failed vote? Have that number 1. What
Okay.
role did the OPM play in that failed vote? What is your
And how did
experience?
you support the superintendent?
Yeah.
okay, yeah, all right.
Provide emotional support.
You're on your own.
What is your experience with finding alternate grant opportunities specifically for sustainability initiatives? What do you see in the next year or two with any unique challenges with these type of building projects? And then tell us about a time when you struggled with a building project. How did you resolve any conflicts with the parties involved?
So the second one that you read, I think is not a live question. That would go back into the lead
Okay.
knowledge, right? So, kind of.
Yeah, I
energy.
agree.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The last question, can we put that second to make sure that if
Get that.
we happen to run long, I think that's
Yeah.
an important one, that, conflict resolution, how does the team work through thorny issues, which there will be some.
In my experience, giving them more than 6 questions is going to be too many pre-given questions, because, I mean, if we get 4, that's a lot to get through. So I wouldn't go any more than 6 questions.
They're going to get the list, they're going to they're going to have their standard presentation template.
Correct.
And then edit it to address the questions that we pre-identify.
Do we have too many questions?
I think we're getting towards that. I don't know that we're there yet.
I think the 6 we have are good.
6 questions, 30 minutes. So that's 5 minutes a question is, that's pretty,
Take out of
It
that
goes fast.
Take out of it introductions, take out of it,
Technology issues.
again, never
God
happens.
forbid, may
I
it
think-
never happen,
I think
yes.
someone made the point too, that this is a public meeting. Most of these firms are pretty astute and will do their homework.
Yep.
That is also true.
And then we have 15 minutes for a live Q and A, so should we limit that to just 3 questions?
Well, we will have clarifying questions. I think, let's say, the staffing piece, for instance, we'll have questions on.
So if we're expecting to have clarifying, we have a list of standard questions that we're asking live. I think it could be too many.
And we have to ask the same live questions to every single,
Consistent, right, because if we're assigning a score, are we assigning a score to our live Q and A as well?
Yes.
If we're assigning a score, they must be asked, so I just.
If we
Yeah.
have these questions prepared
Yeah.
to ask, we should have a score for those
Yeah.
as well.
well, is it a per question score for the live Q and A, or is it an overall, here's our Q and A or our live portion score? And I think that might be easier to manage
Yep.
if that's scored as a block rather than each question.
So it doesn't have to be like this?
But if you just make sure, if you allot, let's
For the
say exactly
pre-prepared
10 minutes,
questions, I think.
you read a question, it takes 12 seconds to read it, and you tell them you have 1 minute to answer.
Yep.
Or you have 2 minutes to answer. We
Yep.
control the length of the answer so that we get the same 3 or 4 or 5 questions out there. Right? Isn't that the only way to guarantee that every firm has had the same question and the same opportunity to answer it?
Yeah. And
just say
it's a
limit it
lot
to
to
2 minutes or
manage.
3 minutes,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a lot to manage. So
But-
maybe you just whittle it down to 2 in your 15-minute, because if you have clarifying questions and then you're trying to ask the same questions to everyone.
I think you need
Yes.
to manage the clarify. If somebody wants to ask a clarifying question, they need to.
Through the
have to
chair.
go through you. And that is a lot to manage, but otherwise it'll be mayhem.
So you have 6 predefined questions, and how many do you have live?
I have 3.
Could you, could you also just have another row Q and A worth 15 points?
Yeah,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then,
So the
that's what
3.
Tristan, yeah, so then, but then the same questions do need to be asked, just to specify, so.
Because if they really
Also clarifying would fit into that.
stumble on
Right.
something, or they really shine on, clarifying something, that has to be calculated in there as well. Otherwise, why are we asking?
And then for the weighting of the questions, so you have 6 predefined plus a Q and A period, so that's 7 total, is what we're looking at now, based on our discussion. So, is there a recommended weighting? Is
Are there questions that you would weigh more heavily than others? Would be my question for all of you.
Well, like your first question has like 5 subparts to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
big.
It's a big question.
It's a big question.
Yep.
Yeah.
That could be even like 30, right?
Right, that could be a big
Do
portion
we
of the
want
total
to,
score.
with this, I think it adds up to 100
Yes.
as our, so do we want to keep
Nice.
that consistent? Yes.
And are we all filling this out
Yes.
and submitting them?
We can do the same thing if you want with a spreadsheet, or if you want a hard copy,
Easier for you, we can do
either
that.
one.
Okay, and then what was the second question?
The second question is management approach. Describe a highly effective team. How do you ensure the continuity of the team throughout the duration of the project?
So that's heavily weighted as well, right?
The next one's about like who actually is on the team, the key personnel.
Which is also, those are the bulk, those first three,
Those
right?
those should carry a lot of the weight.
Like 60% or something?
Yeah, it's like 30, 15, 15.
That's 45 points right there with those three.
If you did
If we
15
did
each.
15 for each of those.
But it should maybe be more.
Yeah, I think the first one could be more than 15, because it
Right.
had like 5 parts to it, so it could be.
Be like 25, right? Like a quarter of the, yeah.
Did I hear you say 30? Or
Yeah, I said,
have 30 and then 15 and 15?
yeah. You could do 30, 15, 15, Rebecca?
So that's 60.
They're pretty meaty.
Yeah,
Those are the biggest questions.
And then the rest could be 10 points each, and then you've got your 100.
And what did you assign for the Q and A block? 10 as
If
well?
we did 10 for that.
I just think of the end result, and it's important to not wait in a way that gets the committee in a decision challenge.
Because the Q and A is more subjective.
It's just, if you wait a question, you just have to be careful it doesn't bring you to it.
I think Q and A is more important than 10 points, especially if we're throwing them some questions designed to kind of test their reaction a little bit and see how they respond to some tougher questions, and kind of see behind the well-rehearsed piece of the presentation. I'd throw 15 or 20 perhaps at the Q and A as a whole. And then
Remainder
remainder, see how we massage those out, like the commissioning and the life cycle cost analysis, they're kind of be towards the lower end of things.
Just a reminder, they will have watched this meeting. These will not be surprise questions.
All right, does the math check out? You feel good with it?
So if I change question number one to 25 points, and then I can add another 5 to the Q and A, so we'll have a 15-point Q and A.
All right. Thank you. Do you have everything you need from us to be
Yes, I
prepared
think
for
so.
Monday? Okay. So at this time, I'd welcome any other business that may properly come before this committee. Do the committee members have any other points or questions?
One
Yes.
procedural thing, is there a predetermined interview order? We have influence over that.
It is randomized, I believe, right? It's at random.
In terms of who goes first?
First, second, third, right?
It's up to if you would like it in a particular order, we can. Normally, we reach out to firms and assign a time to them. Like, I'd probably do it alphabetically.
Alphabetical.
But if you want to see one before the other, I can do that.
I would say
Alphabetical.
either random or alphabetical, then it's no,
Or by point,
Not
you could do the
biased
highest,
choice.
the point count first. It's also alphabetical, okay, all right. All right,
Are we to check references?
I included that just so that you could see what questions were being asked. That's the MSBA template, so that is what we have to submit to the MSBA, and there are questions on the back when we're calling. So over the next few days, I'll be reaching out to these 3 firms' references.
Okay.
And we'll be completing this form,
oh, so you're doing that.
yes.
We don't have to do anything.
Unless the committee wants to.
Well,
so.
I think but I do think there's benefit in having committee members do this reference check, given the expertise
That's
we have
true.
on the committee.
So would you like us to do any of it?
Yes. I'm speaking for Becky.
Okay, so you'll be in touch with us if you need that.
Are there volunteers to do it, or am I just going to send this out to the committee?
I can do some of it.
Happy to help.
Okay, all right.
All right, thank you. Yes.
I have a question. Are there points assigned to this, and does this go toward the decision? The references?
It
Or are
does
these
not-
just like green light, red light? What are we
It's
getting
more
here?
green light, red light. We did not include anything in the request for services document that this would be counted against our decision. However, obviously, if somebody comes back with very poor references, then we would
Okay.
need to weigh that.
And I think it just, per item 3, so the information gathered from the reference checks will be shared with the subcommittee before the interview. So this happens before Monday, and we're aware of anything that might come up through a reference check that's pertinent.
One question for Monday's meeting is, will there be a remote participation ability? Because I will actually be traveling for business.
Okay.
So I can certainly Zoom in if it was available.
Well, part of it, this is your room, Mr. Selectman, but do we have that
Yes, this room does
capability
have
here?
that capability.
Yeah, okay. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
Doing a hybrid?
Right, for me, I guess. Because I won't be able to be here in person.
Yep.
So the only way I'd be able to
I will double check
attend
it, and I'll
is-
make a note, but I
Okay.
don't have a problem with it. Yep,
I've done that before.
yep,
I've been on the other side.
okay. All right, thank you. Hearing no, yes. Yes.
I have a question. Are we assuming it's a addition renovation? Or is there a consideration to a new building and keep the kids in school there and then move them into, will the OPM do that, or?
That's the grade level configuration study, so, it will be that's part of the next phase, once we have an architect on board, to look at the program of the school,
Yeah.
and then evaluate, if that building can be incorporated, renovated, is it in a condition that would lend itself to that? What would that look like? And we'll have a list of different options that will be presented back to the committee,
Yeah.
that we would then decide, are we renovating and adding, or building new?
Can I just make one suggestion? That this is a terrible room to present in. I'm not sure if there's a better space. I know at the library,
The library room is nice.
they outfitted that. It's
They were not
ready.
available. They have a children's event, I think.
So when we've done.
Or they're not open at that time, I think. I can double check it, but I did ask, and, yeah.
What do
For
you
the-
mean it's not a good?
If you're bringing a team and you have technology and, presentations, maybe that's just me.
For the firehouse project interviews, I believe we set the tables up like they used to be. And then we had the presenting over here. I don't know if that's technically possible.
It's very possible.
That might help somewhat.
Okay, so we can look at the room configuration. Yeah, I think that I asked the library and it wasn't, but I'll double check.
Maybe we can like open a window or have a fan or something.
Yeah, you think so?
How do you feel about conditioned air?
All right, any other questions? All right, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? Yes. It's been moved and seconded to adjourn at 9:18 PM. Any discussion? And hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.